occasionally I ask myself a question, and on occasion I consult my tarot decks for answers. And before I even get into that, welcome to the channel where I sincerely have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm having fun doing it. So hello ghouls, goblins, anybody else, thank you so much for being here and joining me. Grab a cup of coffee and settle down, or any drink that you like. Settle down, have a seat. It's gonna be a long one, but I promise a good one, and one that is going to be part or a beginning for a very long journey ahead. On my end, I've always wanted to make a tarot deck ever since I found out what it was. At the same time, I actually wanted to respect what it was. I wanted to respect the medium. I wanted to respect the fact that it has a lot of history behind it, a lot of belief behind it, a lot of spirituality behind it, and sometimes it doesn't. At the same time, I'm a spiritual person, so it has definitely been a tool that I use personally to, guide myself in a certain direction, or guide myself through something that I don't necessarily have the answers for at the moment, because sometimes your plan and God's plan is completely different. So I'm totally fine with that, of course, but I actually wanted to take the time to learn what tarot was and spend time with tarot decks and spend time using them, understanding them, executing readings with them, so that I could actually make my own. Because I feel like this wasn't necessarily the end goal, but it was something that I felt necessary to do for myself as somebody who likes creating things like this. And in terms of that as well, this actually gives me the opportunity to dig into the process of creating a big project like this. Even though it's not an animated film or an art book, it is definitely a project that's big. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of planning, especially to keep it consistent. And I feel like it's a really, really fun opportunity to dig into, tarot cards, of course, but also the artistic process in making these cards, making these illustrations, what my thought was behind them, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and what that means. There's a lot of things that I really love about tarot decks, and one of the biggest for me is the fact that you can essentially tell so many different stories, because cards tend to be very, very specific, especially once they show up in a reading. The direction your spread is in, the question that you've asked, what's your intention while doing it, all of it affects the reading. But the tarot cards alone tell a really, really cool story. So as I get into this and as I dive deeper into understanding what tarot cards are and making them, and possibly showcasing some new interpretations on top of old ones, and showing you guys how I interact with the cards, I'm also going to be digging into, the mood board, the pre-production process, if you will, and spend a lot of time talking about the cards, what they mean, why I'm putting these elements into these cards, why I'm choosing this specific theme. There's a lot to talk about. Obviously, there's 78 cards, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 78. In my deck, there's going to be 82, and you'll see why soon. Not right now, but soon you'll see why. And there's a lot of really cool stuff to talk about. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and let's get into it. I feel like there have been so many ways to interpret and study tarot, and I have tried to do that honestly for a long time, but over the past 2 years especially, I think I actually fully committed to it. I didn't want to, read a giant pamphlet talking about all these meanings and stuff, because that just didn't work with me or my learning style. And in addition to that, by the way, there was the really cool part of actually experiencing and learning from using the tarot, which is how I did learn it. So for the past 2 years and until today, I've quite literally done daily card pulls, and it started with 1 card, and now I do 5 card pulls from sometimes, 3 card pulls, and it kind of just grew from there. And I liked to sit with the cards, meditate on it, check out what it's actually telling me, which helped me learn tarot a lot faster. And maybe, yes, there are interpretations that already exist for it, but the same thing with art, it is an experience that you have when you interact with it, because half of the part is of course making the art, and that's an experience that the artist has. But if you are looking at a card, or if you are looking at a piece of art, it's important that you share an experience with it, you interpret it in some way. And now we're kind of always bombarded with a lot of stuff all at the same time, which has its, well, not merits necessarily, but it has its advantages in being, merits and advantages is the same thing, what are you saying else? But it has its advantages in being something that exposes you to a lot of different types of art and creativity. In addition, it's also kind of daunting, because when you have so much media in your face almost, it feels like you can't necessarily have a moment to sit with it. And one of the things that I experienced while reading tarot for myself, because I only do this for myself, I don't like to read for others, but I have twice in my entire life for my friends. And one of the things that's always been on my mind is, hey, I want to make my own tarot deck. And there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into it, but there's also a lot of really cool stuff that I'll get into in this, where I talk about the meanings of the cards, what those cards actually mean to me, the story that they tell in the spread that they came out in. Because essentially, the way I'm doing this is there's going to be 5 cards per video that I make, but I'm going to do 5 cards every month, which is doable for me, thankfully, and 5 cards every month that I pull out at random, and it tells its own story and whatnot. But before I even get into that, I want to get into the actual concepts phase of it, check out how I'm going to visualize what the look of the entire deck will be, and how to use that as a point of reference. Now, as tarot is tarot, there's already a lot of different interpretations, but the first and earliest interpretation is the Rider-Waite deck. And there are a lot of meanings that are already attached to it. There's already a tarot story attached to the entire deck. At the same time, there have been a lot of really different interpretations that have come out over the years, which I really love. The tarot deck that I've been using recently is the Tarot of the Divine and the Everyday Witch Tarot. Now, these are my 2 main decks that I use, and I just like using them. I love the art, I love the interpretations, and oftentimes I feel a different vibe from each of them, especially when I'm, trying to vibe with the energy of the deck. And so we already have a point of reference with the Rider-Waite deck. We also have a point of reference with the decks that I already use for this project, but at the same time, I want to kind of decide what the look is going to be for the final cards, because it has to be consistent throughout 82 cards, which is how many cards there are going to be in my deck. There are 78 in the traditional deck. There's going to be 4 more, and you're going to see what those are. But for now, we have 5 cards that we're going to get into. But before we even get into that, I want to share my mood board with you, which is filled with a lot of things, and you're probably going to see a lot of familiar artists if you're in the art sphere, of course. You're gonna see a lot of familiar faces, if you will. But this mood board essentially combines what inspires me as a creative, which I put in literally every single mood board that I make, and also what I want the look of the cards to be. Now, the main thing that I was thinking when I was making these cards and when I was approaching these cards is I want them to be small. And I was looking at smaller card decks and looking at what those dimensions are and whatnot. So then I found out about cigarette cards, which are these cards that came with cigarette packets and whatever, and they're really cool because they have some really cool artwork on them, and you're gonna see like 3 images of that there. So that's the size already kind of decided. I like the vibe of cigarette cards, and I like that they're tiny and they're easier for me to shuffle, by the way. So I prefer tinier decks, but in this entire process, there's also, the visual look and feel of what those cards are going to look like. And that brings in Alphonse Mucha and Leyendecker and so many other artists that I'm inspired by. But I want to combine that kind of color tone and that value, sort of, that color balance with Black Sad style. Now, Black Sad, if you don't know, is a brilliant comic and, well, a graphic novel that I absolutely adore. It has inspired me beyond belief, and there's a lot in it that has given me a lot of inspiration and motivation to actually refine my style as an artist. So it's essentially going to be a combination of a painterly style, which you've probably seen if you've seen any of my illustrations, which are few and far between, but they exist. And it's essentially going to combine the cartooniness of that style, but also the color values and all that jazz of Mucha, Leyendecker, all that fun stuff. And Lilo and Stitch is there because, I mean, if you guys don't know, that is the literal movie that inspired me to pursue animation. So many things I feel like I want to give credit to, but when it came to animation and movies and art, Lilo and Stitch. And there's so much to talk about here. But the main point is that this gives me a reference for the visual look of the entire thing. Big key points here is, or the big key points here are that I want the compositions to be sharp and big and with big shapes so that it's visible on smaller card. And I want there to be emphasis on some part of the card when it comes to actually making it. So while I'm recording this, I've already made the 5 cards that we're going to get into in this first part, but I did want to talk about the fact that, yes, there are some parts that I wanted to emphasize, there are some things that I wanted to kind of show, and this deck essentially involves a lot of witches and wizards and dragons and all this fun stuff that I like drawing, but I feel like as a project, it's a very personal thing for me because I, as I said, use tarot decks anyway, and getting into this is getting into understanding my own interpretations, hopefully connecting with the cards more, but also like sharing that process. I think that's honestly really fun, and at the same time I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm sure it's gonna be fun. Like, this was fun. except for the first card that I did. It ended up, not recording the time lapse. My laptop crashed like 20 times trying to export it. So you're gonna get like a chopped a chopped as hell, like fade in, fade out of every single part of the process. So you guys can get an idea of the actual process of making the art, and at the same time you can get an idea of what those cards mean, why it means what it means to me, what it traditionally means, do I connect with it, do I not. Anyway, this is like just a fun little project for me as well, because I don't know, this is just like really cool. I like that I've been able to create a lot of stuff. So this is one of those projects that is honestly very self-indulgent. I'm not even going to kid you with that, like so self-indulgent, but I love that I'm able to share it. So we're gonna get into the cards now. 5 cards, and the spread is really interesting as well, but we'll get into it. So let's get into the very first card, which happens to be I'm going to try and keep this organized and have it in a specific format. Will it work? No idea, because I have a tendency to ramble, as you would know. And also, I have a cold if you didn't notice. So, the first card in this entire spread is the Chariot. And the Chariot is a really interesting card to me, first of all, as the first card in this entire spread of cards, but also as the first card that we are going to be making. Or well, I'm going to be making, but you get what I'm saying. So whenever I think about the Chariot, I think of victory, I think of movement usually, I think of moving with balance, moving with faith, and moving when you don't even know what it is, and balancing the energies. In the traditional tarot card, you can kind of see what that is, but that's essentially what I think of. And when I'm thinking about movement, and I'm thinking about stuff like that, I'm thinking about dragons. So now that we're getting into the part where I actually make the card, here are the first thumbnails of it. And this is essentially where I put down every single idea and see which works, which doesn't, which one I want to throw out and never see again in my entire life. Okay? But this is essentially what I was thinking. Movement, Chariot, having kind of like a North Star to look forward to, or maybe not knowing it yet, but having it in your heart. So that's essentially the vibe that I was going for. That's what the Chariot means to me. It also means movement. It also is a call for you to change, if that's something that comes up in a reading. In this entire spread, I think the Chariot being the first, because if you can't tell, by the way, they are very chatty when I'm chatty because I talk to them a lot. But if you can't tell, that the Chariot is essentially this card that tells you, okay, move. And other cards in the spread of whatever you're doing, it could be a 3-card spread, 5-card, whatever kind of spread you're doing, it'll tell you what you need to know in regards to it. So a lot of the time, the way I look at it is I associate some words with it, some messages to it. I meditate on it, because sometimes when I've gotten the Chariot, it's movement of you gotta move, you gotta change this, you gotta change that. And it depends. So that's the Chariot for you. Enjoy how it looks like. The time lapse didn't record, by the way, because my sweet laptop would crash every single time I tried to export it. And I tried again. It did not work. So I'm just giving you this for a second. And the next one will have a time lapse, don't worry. It has a time lapse of the thumbnails and all that jazz. But, for the final card, here's just a compilation of all that. So, yeah, that's the Chariot. And by the end of it, we have this rider, kind of naive, almost sneaking onto the back of a dragon and flying forward with it. Not really knowing where they're going, but knowing that they're going in the direction that they need to go to. So that's the entire thing. I hope you liked the Chariot. The Page of Cups, I think, is one of my favorite cards, and this gives me an opportunity to talk about the suit of cups and all that stuff. But first, let's get into the meaning of these cards and what I feel when I actually look at this one. So, for the Page of Cups, first of all, I love the illustration on the traditional tarot because it has a fish in it, and I like fish. So, when I look at the Page of Cups, I feel like it is the first step to a massive, massive emotionally fulfilling destiny, which sounds like a big thing, but it is the first step to doing that, or it's like the first intuitive hit that you get when you want to do something. Or the best way I could put it is it's you dipping your toe in the water to check the temperature. So this is very much about creativity and all that stuff. And the Suit of Cups specifically deals with emotions and intuition. That's what the Suit of Cups is about. So this would be your emotional set of cards. So, you'll have the King of Cups, Queen of Cups, Ace of Cups, and all that stuff. Ace of Cups, Two of Cups, etc., etc., etc. You're gonna have all these, and they all mean different things, but a lot of it has to do with emotional fulfillment and what that means to you. So when I was looking at this, I was having a bit of a hard time kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, because usually whenever I start out with something, I have an idea of what it's gonna look like. I knew I wanted it to be like a witch, or like a young witch who was looking at something creative or doing something creative, which is how I came up with this little guy, and I loved it. I love it right now. I think this is, out of all the cards you're gonna see soon, this is my favorite, like absolutely my favorite, and I fell in love with it the moment I finished it. So when I print it out, it's gonna be like, I love this card so much. But that's the Page of Cups for you. Next up, we have one of the quote-unquote scarier cards in the deck, the Three of Swords. Now, there's a lot to say about, oh, it's a scary card. The way I interpret it, it's not. It's honestly just a bit of like a push for you to feel your feelings is the main thing that I get from it. There's a lot of cards that people interpret as scary, like the Tower, the Devil, which, girl, we'll get there when we get there. But when it comes to the Three of Swords, we also have to consider where it sits, right? Where it sits in the actual tarot deck. So before it, we had the Two of Swords. After it, we had the Four of Swords. And what I feel when I see the Three of Swords is obviously heartbreak. It's literally three swords punching into a heart. But I think when the Two of Swords tells you trust your intuition, and the Four of Swords tells you to sit with your emotions and rest, the Three of Swords is telling you to feel those emotions. Not sit with them, not analyze them, not rest. Feel those emotions and understand what they are, which is why I wanted to do it. And it's kind of nightmarish. Totally nightmarish, I think. But with this card specifically, I feel like people misinterpret it showing up in your spread. When it shows up, if it's in the context of like a relationship, sure, it can totally mean heartbreak. But 99% of the time, especially for me, it always means you have to actually feel your emotions so you know where you need to go. Because if you don't know what your emotions are, if you're not feeling them, you won't be able to rest, because that's going to be nagging at you. You won't be able to know where to put your energy. You won't be able to know what's going on. So Three of Swords for me is feeling your emotions, letting that sink in essentially. So that is the Three of Swords for you. Next up, we have another victory card, which is really cool to come out in a single spread. We have the Six of Wands. Now, this is, I guess, what's the most commonly known victory card, or the one that I see referred to as a victory card the most. The Six of Wands comes after the Five of Wands and right before the Seven of Wands. Now, the Six of Wands has a lot to do with victory, yes, but it also has a lot to do with external validation, external praise, which is why in the traditional card that you see a lot of people celebrating a person. I also think it's a victory card and I love it when it shows up. It's also about how are you sharing that prosperity or that energy of prosperity around you, I think. So because Wands, the suit of Wands, is all about action, and I didn't speak about the swords before, but we'll get into it in the last card. The suit of Wands is very much about action and passion and creativity, and it happens to be my favorite suit of Wands, which makes sense. Hello. But I love this suit of cards because it genuinely just motivates me 99% of the time. It tells me what I need to know. So when it comes to Six of Wands, I feel like yes, it's victory, but I also feel like it is the first step before you feel both sides of being victorious in front of other people, which I think all of us at some point in our lives, when something good happens, and it happens in front of good people, of course, people who support you, but if it happens in public and it happens in front of people who aren't so great, we notice that, oh my god, they're gonna try and sabotage that. And that happens quite a lot. That's why Seven of Wands is up next, which is essentially just like fighting off people being really, really messy. So that's the Six of Wands for ya. So the last card in this entire spread is the Ace of Swords, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful sign, of course. But when it comes to the Ace of Swords, I didn't talk about the suit when we were discussing the Three of Swords. But Swords is about mental clarity, is how I interpret it. Now, you may not, but I do, so this is how I look at it. Ace of Swords is 150% about mental clarity. It is about coming through the fog. It is about moving through a sort of brain foggy moment and being like, oh my god, I have it. I have this clear seed of an idea. I have a clear thing of the next step. And, you know, a lot of the times in life, for me, I've never felt a particular way about where am I going forward. Like, my direction has changed so much, but it has always had this core thing: I want to create things. And I came back to YouTube after like 10 years, and that's great, and I love it, right? But so many things have diverted and changed, and a lot of the time that's to teach you something. Where's your mental clarity? Is it clarity about your vision, your outcome that you want, your goal? So when I look at the Ace of Swords, I feel like that's the first sign of it showing up. Because I feel like when you're walking in alignment with your purpose, your path, your vision, you don't necessarily know what the next step is, but you know what you want to do, so you're going to try and do a bunch of things. And I feel like that's what the Ace of Swords is. Because as you move in alignment, you're not going to know what the next step is, but you're going to get clarity on it slowly. And the Ace of Swords is the first, clear-cut sign of it. That's how I look at it. So here is the Ace of Swords for you, which happens to be a Charis, by the way. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. Alright, that was all the cards in the first spread, and that was really cool. That was really exciting. And you're probably hearing my budgies in the background who like to talk a lot because I talk to them a lot. I love talking to them, and they're kind of just vibing in the background. But I have my own interpretation of the spread, and I'm not gonna tell you what it is. You tell me what your interpretation is, because I had a very kind of positive vibe to this one. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around and checking out this entire process, seeing how it works, seeing my interpretations, listening to me ramble on about this stuff. I really appreciate it. Subscribe, like, comment, do all those really cool things that I appreciate very, very much indeed. And other than that, if you made it this far, comment like a fish or something. And other than that, I will see you in the next part of this one, or if you stick around in the next video. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, and I will see you when I see you.